Okay. Great. So again, welcome everyone. I appreciate your joining us this morning because this is a great opportunity for you to not only interact with employers, but also to learn more of the tips and techniques, if you will, that can enhance your efforts as you are looking for a job. You know, here at
Catherine,
A,
can I,
yes,
are you looking to show a Word document? That's what you're showing right now.
should be a PowerPoint
No, we're
that
seeing a Word
says,
document.
okay, bear with me. Okay, and now you're seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
No, thank you. And this is why we have Justin. So again, our objective at AARP is to help everyone live their best lives. And our focus today with this workshop is that we are striving to help you achieve your employment goals, because as you secure employment, that obviously facilitates your ability to live the kind of life that you are desiring. Again, if you have questions, please do put those in the chat, and I will stop periodically to respond to those questions. So our agenda today is about a number of areas that are key to the job search process. Again, looking at ways in which you can use your skills, because let's face it, when employers are hiring, they are hiring because they have unmet needs and require specific skills. So we'll help you better understand how you can inventory your skills. Also, ways that you can enhance those skills through education opportunities. We'll talk about your personal brand, networking, and then ways in which you can update and age-proof your resume. But we'll start with skills, because skills are at the heart of the hiring process. When we look at skills, we have to think about them objectively, because as we consider our skills, it's not just about what we like to do. It's about the ability to demonstrate to a potential employer that we have applied those skills in a manner that has added value to other organizations. So skills fall into two key areas: hard skills and soft skills. And perhaps you've heard this terminology. Hard skills, again, refer to work skills, if you will. Those that are required to do the job. Could be something such as network security, accounting, marketing, etc. These skills are typically learned, but they're also quantifiable. They're demonstrable in a very direct manner. So, for example, you can earn a degree or certification, or you can refer to a course that you've taken that would demonstrate that you have knowledge of these hard skills. On the other hand, soft skills are more subjective and therefore are harder to quantify. And these could include things such as the ability to communicate clearly, solve problems, be a team player, manage your time. All of those are examples of soft skills. Other aspects of your skills that these can refer to would be your outlook and your attitude. So employers are interested in not just your hard skills, and that's where we oftentimes tend to focus when we are engaged in a job search. But more than ever, employers are interested in soft skills, because these can give an indication of how you will fit within the organization. And at the end of the day, when that job offer is made, It is made not just based upon your demonstrable, quantifiable hard skills, but your soft skills and how you will fit within the organization. And a comment here, even with increased use of technology in the workforce and the recruitment process, these soft skills are more important than ever, because these can help you be that much more competitive as you are seeking employment. So another aspect of our skills and inventorying our skills is to think about our transferable skills. So, even if you are a teacher, for example, you might end up in a marketing role or in a human resources role, where you are overseeing training and development, for example. These are the ability to make those kinds of career changes are based upon your ability to transfer your skills or redeploy those skills, applying them in a manner that is different than how you've applied them before. Keep in mind, the skills are consistent. It's how you apply them that would be representative of transferable skills. So hard skills can be transferable, particularly technology skills, because frequently we think about, okay, those soft skills, the ability to communicate clearly, the ability to influence, etc. But skills such as Microsoft Office, collaborative software, and as we move more and more toward artificial intelligence, as you develop those skills, they too will be transferable from one industry or one organization to another. So as we think about what we've covered, it's important that you step back, identify as many of your both hard and soft skills as possible. And as you're doing it, what you want to do is identify examples of how you have applied those skills. It's not just a warm feeling, but how have you applied those skills if you are engaged in a conversation with a potential employer? So we've talked about the skills, we've talked about identifying them and providing examples, but we also have the opportunity to develop skills or enhance existing skills. So it starts by that mindset. We call it being your own cheerleader. I think of it as being your own advocate, and that is maintaining a growth mindset. And I will share with you that ageism is alive and well. We'd like to think that it isn't, but it exists. And one way in which you can demonstrate that ageism should be a thing of the past is through maintaining that growth mindset. So not only being able to demonstrate that you possess skills, hard and soft skills, but also being able to demonstrate how you have expanded your skills or how you have stayed on top of the quality of those skills. So again, it's that growth mindset that will help you as you are looking to expand and develop your skills. So there are innumerable informal learning options, and perhaps you have experienced some of these. Certainly at AARP, we have a plethora of resources online that can be extremely valuable. I'm assuming, hopefully correctly, that everyone on this call is knowledgeable or certainly familiar with LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a variety of learning resources, and a lot of those learning resources are tied, again, to specific skill building. There are other online resources such as Udemy and Coursera, etc., and then there are boot camps, etc. So these are more informal frequently self-directed learning options. Because they're informal does not mean that they are less important. Actually, it means that they oftentimes are more accessible and, again, can be obtained frequently without cost to you. Of course, there are traditional education options. Certainly, certificate programs are available, and community colleges, certainly in the greater metropolitan Washington, Northern Virginia, Maryland area. We are fortunate in having quite an array of very strong community colleges. These can be useful also because there are times where employers will specifically recruit from these community colleges based upon specific courses that students have taken. So again, these are very important resources to tap into as well. And then, of course, professional development. There are alternative ways from a professional development perspective to expand your skills. Again, experiential education. And these are some examples of resources. And then volunteering. Volunteering can give you an opportunity to learn new skills that you otherwise would not have had an opportunity to avail yourself of. So, and by the way, we will have handouts for you that will reference these resources. So if you don't quite capture everything, we will have this information available for you. But what we're striving to achieve here, again, are ways in which you can demonstrate to an employer that you possess existing hard and soft skills and that you have a track record of expanding and perfecting those skills. So we'll switch gears here and talk about your personal brand. As we look at personal branding, and perhaps you've heard that of the concept, it's about identifying or setting yourself apart from others based upon the unique combination of your experience, your skills, your abilities, and your interests. So when we talk about personal brand, doesn't mean that there are not hundreds, even thousands of others who have held the same kinds of jobs you have in the past. That is certainly the case, but it's that unique combination of skills, abilities, and interests that you are focusing on with your personal brand. As you are communicating your personal brand, you are striving to do so through the use of what's known as an elevator pitch. Perhaps you've heard of this referred to as a 60-second commercial or a 30-second commercial. These are all ways in which these have been referred to. So what you're achieving with your elevator pitch, if you will, is a short introduction. Again, 30 to 60 seconds typically, including the highlights that are unique to you. And what you're able to communicate in this brief statement also would be your unique capabilities that would be of interest to a potential employer. So in a short, concise statement, what you are communicating is who you are and how you have the ability to add value. So you want to think about 2 to 3 things that you do very, very well. And these will be qualities or skills that are fundamental to who you are, that come to you just naturally, if you will. Once you've identified these things, again, much as you will have done with the skills, as we discussed earlier, is identifying examples. You know, I will share with you, I have been in this field, as Jody indicated through the introduction, for well over 20 years. And I will tell you The biggest mistake that individuals make when they are interviewing is they fail to respond to the unasked question that's in almost every interviewer's mind, and that is, can you prove it? Can you demonstrate it? So when you're crafting your elevator pitch, what you're striving to do is to have a very brief statement that will allow you throughout the interview or the networking interaction to expand upon who you are with very specific, tangible examples, because that in and of itself will result in your being far more competitive as you are engaged in the job search process. So I've talked about the elevator pitch. Let's look at an example of what it looks like. So here again, you can see Roberta who is she? She's a sales management professional. So think about who you are professionally. And then she goes on to say, with a wealth of experience. Now, a caveat here, something that you want to think about. In no way should we ever feel defensive about our age. But you want to think about, to what degree is it important to say I have, as I did a moment ago, over 20 years experience in a particular field. Sometimes it's important. Oftentimes when you're just meeting someone, it's not, if you are networking or interviewing. So notice the language here, a wealth of experience, or it can be extensive experience. And then you're getting into the heart of this, a history of exceeding sales goals. But you better be prepared to prove it. So if you're saying I have a history of exceeding sales goals, that should engage the person with whom you're communicating. And you want to be prepared to give those examples of how you've achieved that. Then notice she goes on to some of the more intangible aspects of who she is. Reliable, dependable. And even here, she says, and I can prove it by my long-term relationships and by exceeding client expectations. So even when you're dealing with soft skills, this is a good example of how you can, quote, prove it in a manner that will engage, again, the interviewer, potential employer, person with whom you're networking. So this is a snapshot of your elevator pitch. Essentially, you are responding by saying, who am I? What do I do best? How have I made an impact? And by the way, when we talk about how I've made an impact, it doesn't just have to be from your most recent position or your current position. It can be from further back in your career, if it is appropriate. So, who am I? What do I do best? How have I made an impact? What sets me apart from the competition? How can I make a difference for this company? Okay, so those are the areas that you want to zero in on. And again, we'll have a handout that reinforces the elevator pitch. Once you've crafted your elevator pitch, you do want to be prepared to practice it. Stand in front of a mirror. I know it may sound hokey, but stand in front of a mirror, read it, get comfortable with it, practice it, and then turn to your network, which could encompass family and friends, but you, again, want to practice it so you're comfortable with it as well. So I'm going to pause here. Jody, do you have any questions thus far? You're on
Yes,
mute.
we have a question here. Shouldn't your elevator pitch also show that you know the company you are talking with? And shouldn't you try to show how your skills will apply to their business?
Great question. No. In that, this is the elevator pitch. This is where you want to engage the person with whom you are meeting. However, as you expand upon the conversation, that is where you'll have the opportunity to take the nucleus of your elevator pitch and discuss it in the context of that organization.
Exactly. And Kathy, like we always say in the Career Gateway, after you do your elevator pitch, you want them to say, tell me more.
Right.
Like you want to engage them and make it pithy. We go for 30 seconds. And so yes, so I definitely concur with you.
Absolutely. And again, another mistake people make in the interview process is they can be too wordy. So that's the challenge when you try to fit everything in this intro. But this isn't a bad response to that tell me about yourself question. Now, you do want to have a conversation eventually with the interviewer about how your skills can apply, but hopefully you want to develop that so that it is more of a conversation with the person with whom you're meeting. Okay, and again, if you have questions, just drop them in the chat, and as we move along, I will respond to those. So again, think about, as you're developing that elevator pitch, you want to think about the qualities. And again, we all have a plethora of qualities, but you want to think about at least 3 qualities. What are the most significant qualities? And again, this is where we sometimes have a challenge. We want to throw it all in, but again, throw it all in, but then winnow it all down. So think about the 3 words that best describe you and then move forward from there. So as you are building that elevator pitch, certainly it can be a response to tell me about yourself as you're going into an interview, but it can also be, in a networking situation, a great introduction. Again, what you want to do is you're networking, whether it's with someone you're just meeting or former colleagues. We assume that they know what we did. Well, yes, they may know the job we held, but do they really know who we are from a skills and competency perspective? So what you're striving to do, again, with that elevator pitch, is use it even as you are networking. And I can tell you, networking, when we hear the word networking, many of us just shut down because it is just so intimidating, if you will. But really, when you think about networking, it's about connecting and communicating with others, with businesses and with people, and with those who have the potential to advance our job search process. And I say potential because we may think we know who can help us advance towards someone who has the ability to hire us, but we can be very wrong about that. You never know who knows someone else. So that networking is extremely important. And let me give you a personal example. I've hired many people throughout my career, and I can tell you the first thing I do when I have an opening on my staff, the very first thing I do is reach out to people whom I know and say, who do you know who may have these qualifications, etc. That is the very first thing that I do. And I would say a good 90% of the people I've hired through the years have been people who have been referred to me. And that's because they're from people whom I trust. Doesn't mean I didn't interview others, and does not mean that I did not interview those who were referred to me, but they came in as warm contacts. In other words, if I trusted the person who referred them to me, that job candidate had an advantage. And by the way, the referrals were not always from colleagues. I'm thinking of, I have one family member who gave me at least 3 people whom I hired. And they were people she had known from grad school or undergrad school and knew and had stayed in touch with them through the years. So again, do not assume who can make those connections for you. So you do want to connect within your industry, and there are any number of resources, and just as we are meeting virtually today, many of them today are indeed virtual. So take advantage of the fact that we can expand the scope of our networking through virtual interactions, because what many will do today is they will interact with someone virtually and then arrange to follow up with them one-on-one subsequently. Alumni events are great resources to take advantage of. And again, more and more opportunities for in-person interactions are developing. Certainly, social media can be valuable. LinkedIn, Facebook, and I see I need to update my slide here because I still have Twitter, or now as it's known, X, are ways in which you can interact with others within your industry. Many of these social media sites will have industry-specific pages as well. And that's a good way to connect with people. And frequently, you'll have the opportunity to reconnect with former colleagues. So take full advantage of that. And again, as you're networking, it's not about saying, who do you know who's hiring? That's a very short conversation. Rather, you want to lead in with that 30-second elevator pitch and then say, and these are the kinds of jobs that I'm interested in, and or these are some of the organizations or types of organizations I have an interest in. Do you know anyone who's associated with those? Because I'd like to have a conversation with them about their current needs. Because remember, hiring is not just about hiring. It's about filling an unmet need. So as you're interacting with people, you want to get closer to someone who can tell you what's happening, for example, within Marriott International. What's happening there? What's happening within the healthcare industry right now? Where are the pain points, and how might your skills make a difference? It's not about having great conversations with people, a warm handshake and a pat on the back. Not at all. So social media as a resource is becoming more important than ever, certainly for networking purposes, but also just in terms of potential employers having the opportunity to learn more about you. Do not think for a minute that if you are a viable candidate for a position, do not think for a minute that your social media footprint is not being checked by that employer, or certainly by the hiring authority. So make certain that you go in and check to see what you look like online. Make sure you have taken full advantage of privacy settings. Any posting that you are doing, please make sure you are being very thoughtful about what you're posting, because trust me, as literally as we speak, and I will not go into details, but literally as we speak, there are some students from Harvard who have had positions rescinded because of how they are publicly stating their perspectives or their viewpoints about things. So do not think it doesn't matter just because you think it should not matter. And then you also have the opportunity to build your credibility through social media. So let's talk about, as we talk about social media, certainly today, we're looking at LinkedIn as a very important resource, but just a comment, Facebook counts. I know it's not nearly as popular as it once was, but make sure you go through, and if you see anything that even remotely could be determined as inappropriate, even though you're looking at it in context and it might have been okay, but think about it just as a stranger looking at it, take it down, take it down. So overall, once you've cleaned up your social media, you've established your privacy settings, you then want to leverage your existing connections. Don't be afraid of social media. I've had people tell me almost proudly, well, no, I don't use LinkedIn. Oh, no, I'm never on Facebook. Or no, it's not, you don't get kudos because you've been avoiding social media. Use it wisely. And once you land that position, you may never touch it again until you are looking for another job. But do not be dismissive of the importance of social media. Years ago, when it came to interacting with former colleagues, it was very difficult to stay in touch. Because of social media, you may find that there are former colleagues you haven't spoken with in 8 years. You reach out to them on social media and they respond immediately. In fact, I had someone yesterday send me a message on LinkedIn, and I haven't spoken with this person, I know, in 5 years, if not more. And she just reached out to me and I responded. So take full advantage of that so that you're able to leverage those existing connections. And as we talk about LinkedIn, we want to make certain that we're taking full advantage of it. And one way that you are able to take full advantage of LinkedIn is by creating a dynamic profile. And something that I have liked about LinkedIn is not only is it a professional site, although there are personal things that leak in from time to time, but it's designed for professionals. And professionals meaning anyone who works, versus Facebook that's more malleable. But their help section is very, very effective. So as you are building your profile or refining your profile, do not hesitate to take a look at the help section. So make sure you have a dynamic headline and summary, something that's going to engage the person who's looking at your profile. Again, that personal brand, make certain it is consistent. Use keywords that apply to you, your industry, your function, and then list your skills. You have to have a photo. We may not want it. We may think, well, oh no, I'll look old. No, you do want to use a photo because it's been demonstrated repeatedly that those who do not have a photo on LinkedIn are less likely to be contacted by recruiters. And then you want to, and we'll talk about this more with the resume, but create a custom URL. And again, go to the help section. It will show you how to create that custom URL so that you're able to include it on your resume. So the core of leveraging LinkedIn begins with having a strong profile. And just one other comment while we're on the subject of LinkedIn. As I mentioned before, there are various groups on LinkedIn, or various groups in general on social media. LinkedIn has numerous groups, everything from alumni from former employers, alumni from your college or university, industry-related groups. These are all ways in which you can expand your networking. Jody?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. So before they get to be too many,
Yes.
one is about the photo, and it says LinkedIn promotes photos, but others say no. But you need to have a current photo on LinkedIn, because then
You
right,
do. You absolutely do. And again, look at it, make certain it's professional. You know, this is sometimes you may be tempted, you may have hiked, you know, through the Himalayas and you want to show that, and no, this would not be the place for that. Again, a professional photo.
Exactly. And there's not costly. I mean, you can even, you can have a friend do it for you. You can get a professional shot, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but professional and a good headshot. We have a question for how would you incorporate that you haven't been in the workforce for a couple of years?
That's a great question, and we'll talk about that more with the resume. But on LinkedIn, you don't have to explain. You don't have to explain. So you can, and there are different points of view on this. Let me hasten to add that. But again, just list your professional experience. And today, more than ever, there are people who are taking time off to care for family members. Certainly during COVID, there were people, you know, where children were going to school virtually. There were times where people had to take time off to be at home with their children. So it's not problematic, but just again, list all of your professional experience. Don't worry about explaining. If there were things that you did during that time off, so say, for example, you were engaged in very specific volunteer work, include those years. If you took on a few consulting assignments, even if you didn't have a consulting company per se, but you took on a couple of consulting assignments during that hiatus. Again, just put that consulting, and then the types of companies. You don't have to name the companies you were supporting, but again, what was the nature of the consulting? What were the nature of the organizations you were supporting? And then move on.
And we have here, someone said social media accounts without photos look sketchy. Are there commonplace subjects which should be avoided altogether?
And I'm assuming they're referring to social media.
Yes.
Anything about religion, anything about politics, anything about global conflicts, those absolutely should be avoided. Make certain that you are not bad-mouthing, if you will, any former employers or former colleagues. I mean, you may have been driven from your last company for very unfair reasons. Social media is not the place to vent. And many people do, trust me, but that's not the place to vent.
Here's someone says, I think people have been networking for ages before the word networking was used. You have conversations with people and you mention someone else has a job, and then the conversation goes from there. She said, I did that for a friend of mine who was looking. I have another friend who is an HR person, so I connected them. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be formal. It can be, you could be standing in line at the grocery store. You just never know where your next lead will be.
Absolutely.
And someone wants to say, isn't Facebook now called Meta?
The company is called Meta, but I believe it's still called Facebook. I mean, the parent company is Meta. And I readily acknowledge Twitter is now X. But oftentimes I'll see that written X and then in parentheses, formerly Twitter.
Here it says, generally, if an employer is worried about an employment gap, they aren't an employer worth working for. In general, people who have took time off for whatever reason are more dedicated and eager to work than people who are burnt out and are simply trying to escape a different bad job. And here's someone says, I'm relocating. Does that have impacts?
It should not. It should not. And, you know, again, especially today where there is much more in the way of hybrid or remote work, that is less of an issue than it has been in the past. And again, back to the point about the gaps, my experience has been, as I've worked with people who have been out of work through downsizing or what have you, sometimes for a year even, or more, that doesn't prevent them from getting interviews. But the more you network, the greater your ability to overcome that hurdle. But again, if you've got the skills, whomever asked the question is absolutely right. If you've got the skills, an employer is in need of the skills, they will bring you in for an interview. They will ask you what you were doing, but that should not prevent you from getting the interview.
And here's someone who's saying something about, you know, if you have a security clearance or attempting to get a job with a security clearance, the recommendation is to not include photos and keep other personal identifiable information to a minimum. You know, there's, I guess, with regards to security clearances, Katherine, there's a different, you know, if you want to address that.
Yeah, there are different requirements. But again, one of the things you may want to do is to think about who your employer is and inquire. You know, years ago, I did some work with another company with one of the intelligence agencies, for example. And what they would have you know, and this was on developing resumes, for example. This was pre-LinkedIn, I will acknowledge. But even with their resumes, what they had a set of guidelines. So how they communicated the work that they did was, you know, they had guidelines and they understood those guidelines and then worked within them. So when in doubt, anytime you're dealing with a security clearance and with that particular agency, my guess is they would not have been able to show their pictures. But remember, if I am looking for someone with a security clearance, I get it. I understand it. So that's not going to be a barrier if indeed that's the issue.
Exactly. And one more question, then we'll let you continue with your presentation. Someone said applying online is like a dead end. It is about networking. Question for you. How do you know that you are being discriminated against on the basis of your age? It happens all the time. Of course, we all know that there are laws, but so do you want to address that, Katherine?
Yeah. Oftentimes you won't know, unfortunately, because there are certainly times where you will not even be able to get the interview. And in a few moments, I'm going to talk about ways in which you can age-proof your resume. In other words, it's still a very honest, direct, legitimate document, but there are ways in which you can refine your resume so you're focusing on your skills, your abilities, and less on your age. But if you are in an interview, you may sometimes get questions such as, do you think you can handle all of this work? Are you sure that traveling is not going to be a problem for you? You know, questions of that nature suggest that once you came in and they sat across the desk from you, they're thinking, I don't know if this person is going to want to be hopping on and off planes, for example, or I don't think they're going to be that interested in learning new technologies, etc. And that gets back to that learning mindset. And remember, demonstrate. What have you, so that you can respond to those questions. Well, it's interesting that you're speaking about the amount of work. Most recently, with my previous position, you know, over the past 5 years, my work expanded consistently. And with that, I was able to take on those new responsibilities without losing ground at all. or, I'm accustomed to traveling quite frequently. And, I certainly look forward to being able to contribute in that fashion. Again, responses such as that.
Okay, well, take it away, Katherine.
Great. So we'll talk about the modern job search, and again, navigating the new landscape. Someone referenced job boards. They're everywhere today. The good news is most of them, the vast majority, are legitimate. And the other good news is most employers, I would say probably a significant percentage of them, do leverage job boards. And in addition to posting jobs on their own websites as well. But there is the ease of applying online. In fact, with LinkedIn, you can apply simply leveraging your LinkedIn profile. But the obstacle you need to overcome with job boards is the temptation to just shoot your email out willy-nilly. You do need to make certain that with your job boards, you are targeting those positions that will align with how you present on paper. Doesn't matter if you can simply do the job. It doesn't matter. If you cannot demonstrate on paper that you can do that job, don't bother. It's not worth it. Take advantage of email alerts so that, again, you are tapping into those positions that are most likely to align with what you have done most recently and how you present on paper. Remote and virtual work. There's a lot of controversy today following COVID about remote hybrid work. Again, if you are specifically interested in remote work, you can target that type of work with many of these job boards because they'll have a filter that you can choose. If you prefer to work remotely, even though the job may not specifically state that it's remote, you want to at least go through the interview process. Unless it's mandatory that you work remotely, I encourage you to not deny yourself the opportunity to interview simply because you don't see anything that specifically states the job will be remote. There's a great deal of controversy within organizations right now about bringing employees back to the office. Just make sure that if you agree, once you have the offer, the employer agrees that you can work remotely or you can work in a hybrid fashion. When you get that offer, make sure that is in writing. Because let's face it, there's sometimes where you're meeting with the hiring authority and the hiring authority will say, oh, sure, you can come in come into the office a couple of days a week and work from home the other days. Well, that hiring authority may be gone a month later. The new person coming in may say, oh, no, you must be in the office 5 days a week. So again, get it in writing. And speaking of the interview process, you do want to be prepared for those difficult interview questions because they are there. Someone referenced earlier about ageism. Well, that's one way that ageism is reflected. The kinds of questions you are receiving where there's doubt about your ability to be energetic, doubt about your ability to learn new things. But you do want to be prepared by identifying questions that you are most uncomfortable with. Again, the resources we'll share with you will have any number of practice interview questions. Write out your responses in advance and make certain that you're comfortable with them. Remember, playing fast and loose with the truth never serves anyone. So again, think about how you are responding to questions. So, for example, if the question is, are you sure you're comfortable with traveling? You may be thinking, not really, or certainly not every week. Well, it may very well be that you don't need to travel every other week. Once you get into the job, you may realize that, wait a minute, it's not really necessary for me to be on a plane, and we can save a lot of money by taking advantage of Zoom meetings and things of that nature. So your response may be that, while I'm certainly comfortable traveling, can you share with me a bit more about the reasons that the person in this position would be traveling? You know, tell me a bit about the meetings. Tell me a little bit about the staff in other locations, so that you're learning about this and then saying, I look forward to being able to meet with the staff regularly and, you know, as appropriate, traveling to those locations. Do you see where I'm going? You really want to ask questions. You know, you'll get a question, but you can respond with a question as well with these tough interview questions. So let's talk about, we don't have time for the video this morning, but let's talk about virtual interviews. I imagine that many people online here today have become more comfortable with virtual technology just in general and virtual meetings. But with the interview process, it's even more important that you are prepared. Make sure that you are testing the site, because it may not be Zoom, it may not be Microsoft meetings, it can be any manner of technology that the employer is using. Make sure that you're not showing up in your PJs, if you will. I was reading something this morning about someone showing up to an employer complaining because someone showed up for the interview in their pajamas. Not okay. Not okay, even if it is a minimum wage job. No. Doesn't have to be a suit and tie, but certainly it has to be, you know, reasonably professional. And while we're saying think on your feet, one of the advantages of virtual interviews is the fact that you have the ability to jot yourself notes. I know that oftentimes people will write themselves notes and just on Post-its and just put them around the perimeter of their computer. So just little keywords and phrases sometimes, or things that they know they sometimes overlook saying, or they want to make certain that they communicate. So all of that can be helpful. But most importantly, you want to make certain that you are engaging with the interviewer as though you are sitting across the desk from them. Fortunately, more interviews are being conducted face-to-face these days, but likewise, many times, because not every office or every organization, like the federal government, for example, have not returned to being in the office 5 days a week. So you may find that there's a balance. Some of your interviews with one organization may be virtual, some may be face-to-face with that same organization. So be prepared for those virtual interviews. Now, the resume. Today, more than ever, and you've probably heard me state that phrase a number of times today, things are changing. Today, things are changing. And when it comes to preparing your resume, fortunately, there are so many resources, not only those such as Jody indicated with her program with JCA, but AARP has lots of resources regarding resumes, and just in general. There are just a plethora of resources. And with artificial intelligence becoming more of a mainstay in our world, if you will, technology world, there are resources today where you can take your resume, take the position you are targeting, and the technology will make refinements to your resume so that it better matches that position. And most of them do a pretty good job, quite frankly. But one of the important aspects of the resume is that you want to look how current it is. And perhaps some of you have updated your resume within the last month or year. Some of you may not even be able to find it. You're pulling out those old flash drives, putting in one after the other, trying to find that elusive resume. Now is a good time to make that commitment to not only update your resume, but to keep it updated so that it's there at your fingertips should you need it, even for internal positions. So it's not just about external positions. So you want to make certain that your resume is no more than 2 pages. Forget about a 1-page resume. That's very difficult to achieve once you have about 5 or 7 years experience. Keep it simple from a format perspective. This is not the time to pull out the graphics or your photo. Here in the US, we do not use photos on resumes. In Europe, they do. So again, make certain that it's clean and simple, and so that it can go through the scanning process that all companies, most companies now use. Again, people are not making the first pass at your resume unless it's a very small organization. Make certain you're using dynamic language, action words. So rather than responsible for the development of, simply say developed. Okay, so that's what we mean about action words, but also simple, straightforward. Make certain that you're focusing on quantifiable or measurement achievements. This is not the time to simply plop in your position description. You don't need that. What were your core areas of responsibility? And you're stating those in the context of your outcomes and achievements. And then there's the age proofing of your resume. Do not go back to that first training position you held, the first year out of undergraduate school or first year out of high school. No, 15 years or less of relevant experience. Generally, the rule of thumb is between 10 to 15 years. Now, if you have worked for the same organization beyond that, let's say you worked for the federal government for the past 35 years. Well, yes, you would list those 35 years, but you do not need to list every position that you have held during that time. Make sure you have a current email provider, AOL, Yahoo, no. You want to use, if those are your primary email providers, we encourage you to set up a new email either through Gmail or something of that nature, so that, again, it doesn't age you. You do not need graduation dates for college, whether it's high school or college, whether it's a doctorate or whether it's your undergrad, or even if it's high school. You do not need graduation dates. And actually, if you do not have a degree, you do not need to list high school because it's assumed that you have a high school diploma. Any technology skills you have, you do want to list those. And again, you do want to avoid listing the years of experience. Keywords are important, and these are keywords that are relevant to the types of positions you are targeting. Now, keep in mind, you do want to refine your resume for each of the positions that you are targeting. So it doesn't have to be a laborious process. Oftentimes, it's just about highlighting certain experiences. But when you are updating that resume, you are using the vacancy announcement to make certain that you are using similar language as they refer to skills. So for example, the vacancy announcement may say public speaking skills. Well, your resume may say communication skills. Well, if within those communication skills you have public speaking skills, make sure that that's what you include. So what we're striving to do with age proofing your resume is not so much hiding your age, but making certain that the reviewer of that document is able to focus on how you have added value to organizations in the past. Focus on how you may add value going forward. Again, we'll be providing you with handouts with any number of resources. And with this, I appreciate your time this morning.
Wonderful. Katherine, we have some questions. Let's see if we can get to a couple of them before we go to the next speaker. Someone says, by aligning, do you mean to have the keywords of the job in your resume?
Yes. So you want to make sure that you are using those keywords. And again, they need to be defensible. In other words, you do want to make certain that you have those skills. So it's not just about parroting, this is what you're looking for, so I'm going to put it down, but make certain that you do indeed possess those skills.
Okay. This individual says, I was injured while working for the census and now walk with a cane, lifting limitations. How do I handle that?
Mm-hmm. I would not handle that. I would not address that all through the process of applying for positions. Certainly, this is an example of where networking can make a difference. If you know someone within that organization, without going into detail about your physical limitations, find out if that is even going to be an issue. There are disability laws that mean that employers have to make accommodations for you if you are disabled, but that's something that once you have the opportunity to interview, you have the ability to have a conversation about.
And this individual says, what are some of those tools? It can be very time consuming to manually retool a resume.
Gosh, if you look on, again, there are several resources that we'll be sharing with you. But if you were to Google, for example, AI resume resources, you will find many of them. And by the way, many of those tools are indeed free. So, and I hesitate to list them because every time I look, there are more and more and more that are coming online. Within the past year, I can think of at least 5 that have popped up.
This individual says, I've been self-employed for 22 years and I have skills acquired at other jobs that were before that. How do I address that?
Mm-hmm. That would be to use more of a functional resume or a skills-based resume. Again, there will be samples on AARP's website and others, but what you're doing with the skills-based resume is you're leading with your accomplishments. So you have your summary statement and then key accomplishments, and you list no more than 5 to 7 of those accomplishments, and then below that you'll have a brief description of where you worked when, but you're engaging the reviewer with your successes.
This is a good question. Are years of employment different from years of experience?
Great question. They can be. Again, back to the question about what if you have gaps in your resume. It may very well be that during those gaps you were engaged in some type of volunteer work, for example, but you can look at them synonymously. In other words, overall experience. Make sure that you are that on your resume you are listing, again, all of your positions held, and you don't want to have a lot of explanations. But again, if you have experience, then you do want to make certain that you reference those experiences as well.
Okay, well, Catherine. I mean, you're getting lots of accolades in the chat saying thank you, thank you. Catherine is going to stay in chat for a few minutes to answer questions. If you have questions, please ask them directly to Catherine Pons, AARP, and she will answer you directly so we don't interrupt the flow of the next presentation. Catherine, we are on, I'll tell you where we are. Let's see. Okay, so because we have, okay, so we are at 11:16. How do you approach the fact that the degrees are older than 15 years? So we're on
Okay.
11:16, excuse me, questions beyond that, and just answer them directly. But you've answered, you know, so if there are other additional questions, just address them to Catherine in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Catherine. You did a fabulous job. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Mhm.
Thank you, Catherine. It's lovely to see you again.